You know what? Listen, I'm going to make a bold statement. Disney is so creatively bankrupt, they're not going to come back and fix Disney's Tomorrowland in California. I know, right? What I said is bold, divisive, and probably put a lot of Disney fans up in arms. But before you write me an angry comment, I want you to listen to the evidence that I have and then see if that makes it different. And plus, you might be surprised of where this is going. So let's go through it. The first reason as to why Disney is not updating Tomorrowland is because of the nostalgic factor. Let's talk about Autotopia. Autotopia was one of the first attractions at Disneyland's California Tomorrowland to be an opening day attraction. Space Mountain was not there as an opening day attraction. That was added later. Because of that, Autotopia has a lot of nostalgia because a lot of people usually think this idea, like it's a historically important ride for the place of Disneyland's California because it was the first opening attraction. So imagine, say tomorrow, or maybe in the next couple months, Disney makes an announcement that, hey, we're going to be closing down Autotopia and tearing it down to make way for a new ride and new expansions for like Fantasyland and Tomorrowland, or something like that. Imagine if that happened. There would be some fans happy and excited to learn that, there's a new expansion, and that might mean a new look for Tomorrowland. But I'd also say there would also be a lot of fans that would be pretty saddened by that and maybe even angry because after all, there's a lot of nostalgia for that ride. Goes the same for most of the other rides in Disneyland's Tomorrowland. They have Space Mountain, right? Imagine if that was supposed to be torn down for a new ride. People would be devastated. I mean, I would too, but it'd be like, imagine if they also came in and said, well, we're gonna tear it down and we're gonna build a new Space Mountain with like better thrills or maybe slightly better tracks that will age better over time. Who knows? But people would still have a lot of nostalgia for that because of the fact that they wrote it as kids and everything else. So this kind of incentivizes Disney not to make those changes, but also they can bank off of it. They can make merchandise, they can essentially, like with Lightning Lanes and the Fast Pass system that they have, or quote unquote paid Fast Pass system that they have over in Disneyland California, that would mean they really don't need to make any big changes. They just gotta make refurbishments and make sure they work. The second reason as to why I believe that Disney is so creatively bankrupt to not update Tomorrowland is that Disneyland's Tomorrowland is harder to repair. Hey Bricky, who is a Disney YouTuber enthusiast like myself, talks about the fact that there is a tunnel that connects from the People Mover gift shop, which used to be the entrance to the People Mover, over to the Buzz Lightyear gift shop. It actually used to work as a Rocket Rod's queue system back in the day. So yeah, but it's also sort of the prototype of how, how in Walt Disney World, they have a bunch of tunnels underneath the park to make sure it's a truly magical experience? Well, yeah, that's how it operates here at Disneyland California in Tomorrowland, but it was at a much more smaller scale. So that tunnel would then probably have to be filled out, or maybe it's still being used, who knows? But now that causes a big structural problem for the rest of Disneyland's Tomorrowland. And he says because of that, and also with some of the older structures that have been there, well, it might mean that Tomorrowland would have to get a whole total demolishment. And I mean, it makes sense. I'm kind of down with it. I've always been upset about how much wasted space there is in Disneyland's Tomorrowland. You have the Innovations building that now serves as a Sky Terrace fancier restaurant, but the minimum prices in order for you to experience that is at $75 and upwards. And I just find that to be absolutely stupid. But not only that, it used to serve as other things. When it wasn't Innovations, it was then known as Galaxy's Edge Launch Bay, or Star Wars Launch Bay. But that's not even used for that anymore. Now it's just a place where you get a photo taken with Darth Vader. So it's still not being utilized properly for its space in there. That also goes the same for the People Mover tracks, in my opinion. They've sat there for decades and they don't do anything. They don't add to any of the ride or experiences. Kind of would say the same thing for Autotopia, but like I said, there's a lot of nostalgia for that for people, and I'm just like, I would personally wouldn't mind seeing it let go because of the fact that it's an older ride that could use a bit more updates. But yeah, but what I'm trying to make my point of is that to repair or to make something new would mean a total demolishment. And that might even mean closing off portions of Tomorrowland or the entire part of it. So, you know, we don't want to do that because that would leave unhappy guests as they want to experience those things one more time, I guess. So, yeah, why would we want to repair it? But then the last thing is that Disney needs IPs. Tomorrowland is not a land based off of IPs at all. It's not based off of any of the bigger sci-fi films. Tomorrowland is based off of the idea of showing off of what the future of tomorrow would look like. And you're stepping into that. It's an idea, it's a concept. And so Disney is like, we really don't want that. We want it to be tied in with an IP, with a movie, with a franchise of some sort. And this is especially applicable to Disney as of right now. As we know from last year, Bob Iger stating that any new rides or things moving forward has to be based off of a movie or a franchise. So essentially, Disney is wanting to find some sort of IP that could technically work as a Tomorrowland thing and work in there. So yeah, I guess this kind of means that Disney is pretty much very not creatively interesting to do this. So thank you for watching. Or is it? Give me 1 second. I gotta go erase this whiteboard. My counter argument is that Disney is actually wanting to come back and redo Tomorrowland. And here's the evidence that I have to back this up. There's been a lot of new movies that have come out recently that are kind of more sci-fi focused. Recently, we've had Tron Ares. And with Tron Ares, it's talking about the digital world entering the real world and maybe finding coexistence and meaning with that. So maybe that could be used to potentially redo Tomorrowland. And then recently, there's the new Fantastic Four movie. It's honestly quite surprising of how much Fantastic Four First Steps is tied with Tomorrowland. The director of the movie stated that, well, if I were supposed to put a ride of Fantastic Four anywhere, I wouldn't put it in Avengers Campus. I put it into Tomorrowland.
What would be your pitch for an attraction, a Fantastic Four attraction at Disney's Avengers Campus?
Oh, I would not have it at the Avengers Campus.
No.
I would have it in Tomorrowland, which is where they belong.
Yeah.
You know, which is an example of, you know, our movie's 1960s retro futuristic aesthetic, right? Which is referencing Tomorrowland in a way. We even have the monorail song that was written for, you know, that in the 60s in the movie.
Because it fits the 1960s retrofuturism that they have going on in there. And that's also kind of what Fantastic Four has, is this retrofuturism vibe. And it's like the music gives off heavy Tomorrowland vibes and from the movie and also from the park itself. And that's because Michael Giacchino, the composer, literally said that he was inspired by the park's music as well.
I loved writing for this movie because my sweet spot is NASA and like in that Tomorrowland kind of. So when I was like writing this, all I had in my mind was like, the right stuff and the Disneyland Electric Light Parade.
Matter of fact, in the movie, they even have a small segment dedicated to the music to People Mover / the monorail theme that was just in the film, and it was so lovely. And then the fact that they put the Fantastic Four First Steps in Tomorrowland, notably by Space Mountain and by the Jedi Academy training place, which is now used for whatever it is. There's also Lightyear in 2022, of the fact that that movie was trying to talk about space travel and exploring it and exploring like planets beyond our own. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. And even the rumors of hearing that Lightyear was potentially going to be the redesign to Space Mountain. But with all these three films, it's kind of like, well, first off, Fantastic Four, while it's great that the fact that it's trying to be put into Tomorrowland, it can't really go into Tomorrowland because it's a Marvel film. So obviously by the next year in 2026, when they make their debut in Avengers Doomsday, yeah, they're not going to be in Tomorrowland. Tron Ares flopped, and so did Lightyear, so then Disney's probably like, well, guess we got no new IPs to be tied with it. And it even feels like that even though a lot of this was designed for the ideas of putting it in Tomorrowland, it doesn't feel like it really works. But the one part of me that's been bothered by all of this is D23. For the last couple recent years, there's been a lot of rumors suggesting that Disney might give the big announcement, like, and one last thing, say that they're going to redo Tomorrowland, or they're going to do the People Mover track in Disneyland, California. Like, they're gonna have a whole track and they're gonna open that soon. We've heard it every year, but every year we don't see it. There's even some concept art flowing around. I think it's been made by some fans. Some of it has been made by fans, and then some of it has actually emerged from Disney from all the way back in 2008. So Disney has thought about having a reboot for some time for Tomorrowland in Disneyland, California. But abroad is where I want to talk about this the most. Shanghai Disneyland, which it has the most interesting Tomorrowland. While, yes, there are IPs found within it, which is Tron, Astro Blasters by Buzz Lightyear, and Lilo and Stitch, the rest of the park doesn't feel like it's actually part of an IP. For this Tomorrowland, Disney worked with some architects called Grimshaw Architects. What they did was quite interesting because what they wanted to do was implement some really unique philosophies. The reason why that it's kind of curvy and windy is that how you're going on a journey of life and stuff. And they wanted to reflect that quite literally in the parks and how it has different levels that you ascend and descend.
One of our sources of inspiration for Tomorrowland in Shanghai was very much looking at Chinese traditions in landscape painting or in garden design.
So from the very earliest meetings that we had, we started to think about this idea of a harmonious relationship between the architecture and between the landscape. And in that combination, creating a sense of journey and creating this sense of not revealing everything all at once, using the architecture to frame very particular views.
So we came up with this idea of creating a kind of topography, if you like, a three-dimensional form where we would have ramps and stairs, where movement through the park became almost an experience in its own right.
And that goes the same for even the rides, like the jetpack rides and the Tron ride. And I love the fact that they even incorporated like the light trails from the movie. But when you look at it, like it's not tied to any of those IPs as much. Like you don't feel like you're looking at an IP-driven world of Tomorrowland, in my opinion. And I also love the fact that in their architecture, they even try to infuse the ideas of with nature and technology working together. And you can even see that through the reflection of their designs of the buildings and with some of the plant life that they have scattered around. It's really rad. And here's the thing, even though this Shanghai Disneyland, Tomorrowland, it's been open for almost 10 years, but still in the Disney fandom, it is considered one of the best and one of the coolest Tomorrowlands out there. And then there's Tokyo Disneyland. In like 2 to 3 years ago, they had a really bold announcement that they were going to tear down Space Mountain that they have over there and rebuild it in a newer form that would allow like cooler pieces of light to be more open. And we don't know what the inside looks like, but we are like, it's truly fascinating. They made a bold choice by tearing down and remaking one of the most classic and beloved rides out there, which is Space Mountain. But listen, there's been one thing about this that's been bothering me, that has been on my mind a lot about Disneyland's Tomorrowland in California. And it's this. Does anyone remember the 2020 pandemic? Right? We all remember it. We all were witnessing and being a part of it. It was very interesting. But I want to talk about this the most. In Disneyland, California, they announced a couple new things. For example, Splash Mountain was then announced to be redone to Tiana's Bayou Adventure. which is now opened as of this year or last year, somewhere along there. But there's this. The Disneyland California was closed from May of 2020 to April of 2021. And in that time frame, 2 months after, in June, Disney opened Avengers Campus. And in that time frame, the park was closed and there were no guests. So here's what I'm baffled by. Why didn't Disney, during the 2020 pandemic, start announcing or announced and start getting construction on Tomorrowland? Because think about it. They had the perfect opportunity for nobody there. They could have demolished the whole thing and could have started like ideas for, or like start construction, get some ideas out there for what Disney's Tomorrowland was like Disneyland California's Tomorrowland could have would have looked like. I'm just saying, like, they had that whole year. But some people would argue and say, well, Gabe, there was literally no time for that. They had to go work under really strict conditions. But that Disney's Avengers Campus was opened 2 months after the fact that they reopened in 2021. So construction was still going on. I would say though that, you know, Disney didn't know how long this was going to be, but I'm just saying they had the opportunity. And people would say, well, Gabe, with Avengers Campus, that was closed in 2018. True, but what's really fascinating is that those areas that have been closed down, for example, over by Tomorrowland, that was closed down for like 3 years, but they got it done in that amount of time.
Sorry, I realized that when I was editing this that I was saying the wrong place. What I meant to say was Adventureland, how that area was somewhat closed off for Galaxy's Edge, and how they got it done in about 3 years.
And so did Avengers Campus. It also got done in 3 years. So I'm just saying, they had a really perfect opportunity, but they chose not to. Because I'm pretty sure here's what's happening. Disney has made an announcement last year saying they're going to invest $60 billion into the theme parks. But I know where that money is going. It's not going back into Tomorrowland. It's probably going to go into the new Avatar expansion that's going into Disney's California Adventure, along with the Coco ride, along with the expansion of Avengers Campus. So really, why would they want to come back to Tomorrowland, like I said about the creative bankruptcy? I have one more point to make. Let me read to you a quote that I often think about for Tomorrowland and Disneyland as a whole. Disneyland will never be completed. It will continue to grow as long as there is imagination left in the world. A direct quote from Walt Disney. And this is what I think about a lot. Disney should obviously care about Tomorrowland. It should not be continued to let there and be stagnant, especially for the fact that Disneyland is supposed to evolve, supposed to change, supposed to be different every 30 plus years or more. It should be. It shouldn't be this idea that Tomorrowland can stay in the past and we just accept it that way. It should move forward. And I know that another counter argument that people would say is that, well, Gabe, the world of the future is always approaching. It's very near. So coming up with the perfect world about what the world of Tomorrowland would look like is very hard. But I personally don't agree with this statement. I think that with Tomorrowland, it gives you the opportunity to think outside of the box. It is your time and your opportunity to tell whatever story you want about what the future could look like. And you can leave a hopeful and optimistic idea about what it could look like. And especially now, we need that now more than ever. So instead of me complaining about that real quick, I'd like to propose an idea.
This is post-editor Gabe. I'm filling this in for this one part because I didn't make it very clear on my video, but I want to make it clear here. An idea that I wanted to propose is that I would think it'd be really cool is if the whole entire part of Tomorrowland was like a space part, and then we were like astronauts training to go into space. So then there'd be different rides based off of like jungles or oceans or desert-like planets. And then Space Mountain would serve as like the central point of that we travel to space and explore out there. And say if we want to still keep like iconic rides such as, well, I was thinking we could still keep the Orbitron ride, but we just make it a little bit more better looking and futuristic. That's my idea, at least.
I'm just saying that's an idea, a concept. It'd be all based off of its own idea. I never really think to myself that IPs really help with the land. I mean, certainly they can, it can be good, but I love the fact when Tomorrowland is more of itself, more of its own idea and concept. You can still have IPs, but just don't make them so overly present that over the years, it's just going to degrade and ultimately not add to the parks. So I believe that Disney's Tomorrowland deserves better, but Disney is too cowardly to not come back and make it, because it's a risk, it's a chance. And why do that when we already have films and other things that could take its place? I hope you enjoyed this. If you believe that there's a different philosophy to be had, or your idea of what Tomorrowland should be, let me know in the comments. I freely encourage it. Thank you, and have a good one.